Welcome. So glad to have you all here this morning. And man, I can't really think of a better topic to kick off a brand new year than time management, right? If you look up at my family picture, you might see that the way that God built our family is a little interesting because we have our two girls, Sophia and Olivia, who are 17, and just in a couple weeks, Olivia will be 16. And then we have a 9-year gap, and we have Zachary, who is 7, and Timothy, who is 4. So we constantly joke that we have like two sets of kids. We have our girls, we have our boys, we have our bigs, we have our littles. And man, I had no idea that God would form our family the way that He did. But now that it is this way, I'm so grateful. I have like two built-in mommy helpers that are just the absolute best big sisters in the whole world. And we are all just loving the rambunctious, fun energy that the boys bring to our family. But when I got pregnant with Zach, it had been a very long season of sort of like unexplained infertility. Why did it take that long to get pregnant again? And I had kind of given up thinking that I would ever get pregnant again. And then I was suddenly pregnant with Zach. And I really remember thinking at that time, I get this sort of second chance at motherhood. Because you see, two things were coming into play when the girls were little. First of all, the girls were born back to back. They're 14 months apart. And so for the first 2 to 3 years of their life, it is a complete whirlwind. I can't really remember those early years of either one of them. And the second thing that came into play is that I didn't really have a plan. I was very of the mindset, really my only responsibility is really the only thing I need to be concerned about doing is keep the house standing and keep the children alive. And that was like a pretty low bar for me to have. But something happened when Olivia was 1 year old, and as Jessica explained in my bio, that is when I got saved. I became a Christian when my youngest daughter was about 1 year old. And at that time, everything in my life radically changed. I realized that the way that I had been approaching motherhood was not good. And that this really low bar that I had of keep the house standing and keep the children alive, that God had so much more that He was calling me to and equipping me in my role as a mom. And so by the time Zachary and Timothy were born, I was so excited thinking, oh yes, I get to do this all over again. I get this sort of second chance at motherhood. Not only that, but just normal age and the wisdom that comes with age made me realize, man, these seasons go by so fast. I mean, I had a 10 and a 9-year-old, and then we were back suddenly in the infant stage at the same time. And so just having that perspective of realizing these seasons that the kids go through, whether it be the newborn stage or the toddler stage, they all happen so quickly. So I have a little bit of tried and true methods and just very, very practical tips to share from my years of being a mom that I'd love to give for you guys this morning. But before we do that, I want to just quickly mention some Bible verses that for me really talk about why it is that I should care about how I spend my time and just the thought behind that of, what are the goals and what am I doing with my time as a mom? So Psalm 90 verse 12 says this, teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. That's Psalm 90:12. Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. And what the Bible is saying there is that we need to think often about the fact that we're not infinite. We need to understand that our time here is limited. We need to think about the brevity of the seasons that I was just talking about. And when we think often on that realization and that truth, that will give us a heart of wisdom because we'll realize and recognize, I don't have infinite time. I don't have my kids in my house forever. This toddler stage, this infant stage, this teenage stage, whatever it may be, is only for a short time. So how is it that I'm going to be spending my time, and what is it that I'm going to be doing that is coming from the heart of someone who is wise? So really stopping and taking count of the brevity of the seasons, the brevity of our own life, and just the quickness with which childhood, in regards to motherhood, happens. The second verse that I became very convicted of after becoming a Christian is from Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 17. It says this: "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise," there's that wisdom again, "but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil." In those early days of motherhood for me, making sure that the house was still standing and making sure that the children were still alive wasn't really making the best use of my time. There is so much more that I could have been doing. There are so much higher standards and a higher bar that I could have set for myself, but I wasn't making the best use of my time. I was living in a very unwise way without thinking about the quickness of the seasons or even really being able to cherish and pour into my girls in those really early years of their life. Not only this, but we serve a God, you've probably heard it now a few times, we serve a God that is holy. And God says that we are to be holy because He is holy. That means that we are to strive for that same moral perfection and just perfect nature, purity of who God is. That occurs when someone becomes a Christian. That is what we should be striving for, is being holy as God is holy. And so for me, once I became a Christian, holiness then extended to even the way that I spend my time and what am I doing with my time. So like I said, I've got 4 practices for time management for busy moms. I am a busy mom too. I totally get it. I understand all of the ways that you're getting pushed and pulled and schedules and, choir and piano lessons and voice lessons and baseball and football and just all the things that we are getting to every single day. But here are some tried and true practices that if we can even put one of these into place when we walk away, I think that it will set your year up, my year up, these are things that I do all the time, really well in the new year. So, number 1, practices of time management. Step number 1 is to clearly identify your priorities. If you want to be someone that manages your time well, seeking to live as someone who's wise and not as unwise, seeking to be someone who is holy as God is holy, the first step is to clearly identify what your priorities are. When we clearly identify what our priorities are, then it provides for us that benchmark, that bar, that motivation of what it is that I'm seeking to achieve with my time. For those of you who are married, it would be great and highly, highly recommended to actually sit down with your spouse and work through what are the priorities, what are the goals, what are the things that we're seeking to achieve as a family, and then let that dictate the way that we set up our time and our priorities for the year. If you follow me on social media, my husband and I actually just had the opportunity to do that this past weekend. We went away on what we called a planning retreat, and we worked through these different categories that I'm going to share with you now and talked through what is our goal, our priority, our aim in this specific category of our lives for this year. And then we spent time planning out our year and coming up with actionable steps of how we're going to achieve these goals every step of the way. So here are some of those priority buckets that you can sort of think through and work through. And what you work through in each bucket is going to look different for you or for your family than it does for me. But here's some good, just large buckets to think through. Bucket number 1 for us would be the spiritual bucket. And that's where my husband and I sat and talked about, okay, how are we going to commit to grow in our relationships with God first and foremost? Well, that means that we want to make sure that our spiritual disciplines are in order. That means that we want to make sure that every single day, my husband and I are getting time to get into God's word, to spend time with Him in prayer. We're making it a top priority of our family to be at church and to be at the ministries and the events that are planned and provided here so that we can make sure that our number 1 priority of being followers of Jesus is firmly fixed in place. So that would be bucket number one, is that spiritual category. Maybe you could even think of, further meshing that out of like, how am I going to accomplish that? Well, our church does something that's called the Everyday in the Word, which is a daily Bible reading program. So if you're sitting there going, well, I want to read the Bible more, or I want to grow in my knowledge of who God is, and you're not quite sure where to start, I would so encourage you to download our Compass Tustin app and follow along with us. That we have a Bible reading plan on the app or on our website, and it'll tell you every day, like a certain section of Scripture. It's been working out to be about 2 chapters a day. We've been working through Genesis. We're just about finishing up that book before we move on to Exodus. So even if you're looking for something tangible to do, rather than just, I'm going to get into the Bible and like open it and do one of these, you can follow along with us in the EDW. Another thing to do would be to, like I said, download our app, get on our church website, and look at all of the various ministry opportunities that we have. Last night, we had about 70, 80 women in this room for our first women's workshop of the year. We're working through 2 Peter chapter 1, and talking through, last night was specifically thinking about self-control and how we are to lead and live self-controlled lives. We've got stuff going on for kids on Thursday nights, our Foundations program, which is Bible memorization. If you've ever heard of Awana, it's similar to that, but better. Because Pastor Nate wrote it. Our very own pastor wrote it, and our kids are working through this Bible memorization program that also gives you a tool in your hand to work through Bible passages with your kids. It gives you like a whole lesson that you can just read through, and that happens on Thursday nights. So much even going on here at Compass that can help aid you and your family in that spiritual priorities that you and your husband or that you set for yourself. Another bucket to think through would be relational. This is now, for me and for my husband, our primary relationship in our life is first with God. So we already tackled that with the spiritual bucket. But now our most important person in our life would be each other. So my husband and I spent time thinking through what are the priorities that we have in our relationship with each other. And for us, a big one for us was, how are we going to safeguard and make sure that we get alone time together, and how often every month do we want to aim for that alone time together? Right now, with 4 kids, only one other driver, Sophia's driving in our house, but our 3 other kids are not. Right now, what we determined that was achievable and doable is twice a month date nights. And so that's what we purposed, and that's what we planned. And we've got an every other week system where we're going to make sure that we get out, and every other week we're going to get that one-on-one time together across the table from each other, or maybe even going on a walk or going to Topgolf. We love going to Topgolf, or whatever it may be, just making sure that we're getting that one-on-one time to connect, to build our relationship, to talk through things, work through things together. Another obviously important relationships for us are our kids. What do we want our priorities to be in our relationship with our kids? How are we making sure that each of us are getting one-on-one time with each of our kids? Well, for us, it works out really well because we've got 4 kids and there's 4 weeks in a month. And so both of us are aiming to spend alone time with each of our different kids 1 time a week. Again, for us, for our busy calendar and schedule, that's what works for us for right now. But it could look like whatever you and your husband want it to look like. But stopping and thinking intentionally and purposefully, what do I want these relationships to look like? What do I need to invest in them? What does the time commitment look like in order to invest in them? We also talked about extended family, making sure that we're getting time with grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles and cousins. We talked about even specific people in our church that we want to grow relationships with. We talked about specific families at each of our kids' schools that we want to grow our relationship with, and thinking through really practical steps that we can take to do that. Another bucket to think through would be personal. a personal bucket, and that might look like goals or things that you want to achieve as far as like weight loss, diet, exercise. For me and my husband, it also included specific reading goals. How many books are we aiming to read this year? Which specific books are we purposing to get through this year? But in that personal bucket, it could be anything that's important to you, anything that is a goal that you're wanting to achieve. Last year, my goal was I want to complete this biblical counseling certification, and my husband was on board with that, and our pastors were on board with that, and so that became something that I needed to make time for and make sacrifices for in order to get through this 2-year process to get that certification done. And praise God, we were able to do it. But it takes that planning in order to do so. Other buckets to think through would be family, home, finances. We also talked about travel while we were on our planning retreat this past weekend. We took time to stop and plan out and block out those weeks in our calendar that we were going to make sure that we got family vacation time over the summer and spring and into the holiday season of 2024. So whatever buckets are important for you to think through, think of the broad overarching category and then all the little things that fall under each category. I'm sure that you all have heard the term, you have to spend money to make money, right? There's this thought in business that I need to actually invest and put in some money into whatever I'm selling or trying to grow in order to then reap money, in order to make money. Well, the same thing is true with time. You have to spend this time to clearly identify your priorities in order to make the time to do them. If you don't have clearly identified priorities, you're not aiming at anything, right? If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time, but then your target is nothing, kind of like how I was in my first early years of motherhood. So commit to doing this. Clearly identify your priorities. Like I said, you can either sit down by yourself or sit down with your spouse if you're married and work through what are the priorities and the goals that I have for me and my family. Maybe it's even a season for you where you can't plan out an entire year. Maybe you're at a point where like, girl, we're just going month to month. Then you know what? Do it month to month. Sit down at the beginning of every month and think through, okay, what are the priorities that I have for this month? Or maybe it's even seasonal. What are the priorities and the buckets that I'm going to work through for the spring? Then I'll worry about the summer and the fall and the winter as they come. However it may be, stop and clearly identify your priorities for whatever season it is that you are going to work through. This will be the first step in helping you to be someone that manages their time well and intentionally with purpose. Number 2, if we're going to be women that manage our time well, we need to limit or eliminate distractions. And this is where things get a little trickier. We need to work on limiting or eliminating distractions. So in this step, what we're doing is we're intentionally taking stock. Maybe this would even happen over a week-long period or a few days. Take stock and look at what is eating away at my time that is not pushing me towards or promoting any of these priorities that I have already clearly identified. So basically, what are the time wasters in my life? And somewhat unfortunately, we live at a time when the time wasters and the access to time wasters are at an all-time high because we have these little devices in our pocket or in our purse, these little computers that can access anything in the world that are quite distracting. So very common time-eating distractions would be TV, YouTube, Pinterest, social media. I mean, all of these things, you sit down and you can like go into this warp, especially with the advent of reels, right? You just sit there and you're like swiping through reels and sending them to like the 2 or 3 people that you constantly send all the reels to. But suddenly, I mean, and that's fine and fun and certainly something that I do too, but suddenly you can be like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half scrolling through like 10, 15-second videos, right? And all of a sudden you come to this realization, oh, I just wasted so much time. So here's some tricks, especially with our phones and especially with apps, to help bring that to realization and maybe even give you some of that motivation to limit or eliminate these time-eating distractions. On your phone, if you have an iPhone, and I'm sure you can do this on Android, I just don't know the steps to get there. On your phone, you can go into your settings, and there is a place that is labeled, I think it's labeled screen time. You can click on screen time and it will tell you the average amount of hours and minutes that you spend on your phone per day. Now, if you're someone like me who also tends to do a lot of work from my phone, that can look really jarring at first, but the iPhone is so cool because it will actually break it down. So you can click on that and it will further divide it out and tell you the categories. Like, okay, this percentage of that time is when you're in your email. This percentage of that time is when you're in your text messaging app. This percentage of that time is when you're in social media or YouTube. And that's like the ouch, right? But the iPhone is also super cool, and like I said, I'm sure that they have this on Android. You can actually go in and program time limits on the apps. So let's say that you open up your settings, you realize, oh my goodness, I'm spending let's say 5 hours a day on social media, and you're like, ooh, I would really like to be more like 1 hour a day on social media. You can go into your phone and program that into your app. And when you reach that time limit on that specific app, a little pop-up will come up and it'll say, you've reached your time limit for today. Now, it takes a lot of self-control to say, okay, and just close out the app and be done with it. Because, of course, as adults, we have the opportunity to bypass that and just keep going. But it will at least raise the awareness to you of, okay, wow, I've already spent 1 full hour on this particular app. I mean, it could be whatever you want, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever you think is the appropriate amount of time, and something that will even give you that warning, like this is how much time you've already spent for today on this particular thing. So limit or eliminate distractions that are not pushing you towards that goal or your priorities. Step number 3. I realize that this is probably going to sound slightly archaic when I say it, but just stick with me because I promise you there's actual research behind this that I'm going to share with you. Step number 3, in order to manage your time well, is to keep a to-do list. Step number 3 is to keep a to-do list. Okay, I promised you that I would share research, and I'm going to. Florida State University did this fascinating research on keeping a to-do list, and this is what they did. They called in 2 separate sets of people that were not interacting with each other separately. To group A, they said, we want you to take time to think of the next big project that you have coming up in your life. Maybe it's a big due date at work. Maybe it's a presentation that you're going to be giving. Maybe you're in the middle of planning a wedding. Maybe you're in the middle of home renovation. Whatever the next big, really big thing is that you have going on in your life, just take 2 minutes, 3 minutes to identify what that thing is. Okay, so they took their 2 or 3 minutes, they thought about that next big thing in their life. Then they seemingly moved on to a completely unrelated part of the day, and they said, okay, now we want you to move to these tables, and we want you to spend 20 minutes reading through a book, and at the end of that time, we're going to ask you questions about the book. Then they brought in group number 2. And they told group number 2, started off the exact same way. We want you to think about the next big project that you have going on in your life. And so they did that. And then they said, okay, now here's a pen and paper. We want you to write down the steps that you need to take in order to complete that project. Just like bullet point it out. You can take like 5 minutes to do that. So then they did that. Then they said, okay, move to the tables, read for 10, 20 minutes, whatever it was, and answer these questions about it. Okay. What was so incredible is that the second group blew the first group out of the water as far as how much of the book they got through and the retention that they had while reading the book. They were able to 100% answer all the questions correctly. Group 1 performed abysmally, got through way less of the book, couldn't even remember the stuff that they wrote down. What was the difference between these two groups? The only difference was that group number 2 took time to write down a to-do list. It's not even that they practically went out and checked anything off of that to-do list. It was just the simple act of writing it down. And here's what's amazing. God has formed our minds to be these incredible machines, these incredible computers. And basically what happens in our mind when we don't write something down, our brain knows I'm the only source right now that's reliable that is storing this information. And so if you think of your brain as being something like your computer browser, where you've got 85 tabs open all at the same time on your browser, it's going to slow down your processing on your computer, right? It's going to slow down how quickly that computer is able to work. The same thing is true of our brains. When we don't write something down, our brain is alerted, I have to keep that tab open in my mind because it's not stored somewhere else. It slows down our processing, it slows down our productivity. So as crazy and archaic and as simple as it seems to keep a to-do list, by keeping a to-do list, you will see your attention span, your ability to retain information, your ability to be productive within a certain amount of time skyrocket. And you can imagine this going on in your own life because we've all had this happen to us, right? We might be sitting in front of a pile of laundry, folding the laundry. And then all of a sudden we get halfway through the laundry and we realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to start defrosting the chicken. And so we run to the freezer and pull the chicken out and start running the hot water over the chicken to get it going in time to be defrosted. And then all of a sudden, as we're standing there doing that, we remember, oh my gosh, I never texted that girlfriend back. And so then you sit there and you're feverishly texting. And then as you're doing that, you're like, oh my goodness, I said that I was going to pick up that specific toy, grab it out of our toy chest for my girlfriend. I need to go grab that toy and put it by the door so that I'm ready to take it at pickup and hand it off to my girlfriend. And so then you've got half a load of laundry folded in the living room. You've got your hot water still running over your chicken. You have a text message that's typed out but hasn't actually been sent. And then you're standing in your entryway with a toy going, what was I doing? Well, the reality is you were doing 5 different things and none of them are actually completed because our brain is jumping from thing to thing to thing and trying to keep all these tabs open of what am I doing? And in the meantime, nothing's actually getting finished. So, in order to keep a to-do list, I would highly recommend that you do it either digitally, where it's on your phone, or if you're like me and very old school and need the pen and paper, I literally have a notepad in every room of my house. I have 3 up in my office because no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, if I'm in the middle of the laundry and I remember, oh gosh, I need to text Tracy back, I will stop and rather than texting Tracy back, I'll write it down on my to-do list. If I'm in the middle of forming an email at work and I remember, oh my goodness, I need to call our cleaning company and reschedule the dates that they're going to be here at the church to do all their deep cleaning. Rather than doing that right in the moment, I just write it down. This helps you be able to focus on task, get it done, while also freeing up that space in your brain to be able to process and work efficiently. So I know it sounds archaic, I know it sounds dumb, but by keeping a to-do list, your productivity will actually skyrocket and you will see, oh my goodness, my brain has so much more ability to be sharp and quick and thinking because it's not bogged down by all of these tabs being open. Try it. Just try it and see, and I bet you that you will be amazed. Like I said, you can do this with pen and paper. That does require you to have a notepad in every room of your home, which I do, and I'm fine with that. Or you can do it on the Notes app of your phone. We've got all of these smart devices in our homes now, so you could even tell Alexa to start a to-do list for you. You can tell Google Home to start a to-do list for you and just speak it out to them. Whatever method works best for you, just keep a to-do list that to free your brain up of that space and to also give you the ability to focus on one task at a time rather than jumping from thing to thing to thing. All right, number 4. This is probably going to sound at first like I'm being a total hypocrite and completely contradictory to what I just said, but stick with me. Number 4 is to batch activities. If you want to be someone that manages her time well, we need to become proficient at batching activities. And what I mean by that is doing 2 things at the same time in order to utilize my time to the best that it can be utilized. Now, this is different from what I just explained because I'm not jumping from thing to thing to thing at the same time. I'm intentionally pairing 2 complementary or 2 necessary things together at the same time in order to be maximally productive. So here are some examples of what I mean by that. When you meal prep 2 times of the portion rather than 1. So for example, tonight, I'm going to make chicken enchiladas for my family. But rather than just making 1 batch of enchiladas, I'm going to make 2. I'm going to make one of them tonight. I'm going to freeze the other one so that I can pull it out in the next couple of weeks and have a ready-to-go meal. So one of the best ways that you can do this is with meal prep, doing 1, 2, or 3 times the recipe and freezing it, saving it for later, or even taking it over to a friend and serving another family. Maybe that helps check off one of your relational priorities of serving others. Another thing to do is to listen to an audiobook or to a podcast while you're doing your housework. This is such a good way to tick off if you are like my husband and I and have like a specific amount of books that you want to read or specific books. This is a great way to be productive with chores or housework or yard work while also getting through books, or even just growing in your specific knowledge of a specific area. There's such a wide array of great podcasts available to us, whether it's like news or wanting to be well informed about politics, especially this year being an election year, or maybe it's gardening or the Bible teaching, whatever it may be. You can utilize the time that you're being busy with your hands to also engage your mind by listening to an audiobook or a podcast. Another way to batch activities is to schedule your play dates or your meetup times with other women around meal times. You are going to have to stop and eat a meal anyway, and so why not merge those 2 together and schedule a play date or time to connect with another mom over a meal. My favorite thing to do is to grab lunch together or even breakfast. So schedule your things around times that you're going to have to stop and be still anyway. Let's see. Another way to do this is to choose to do your exercise with a friend. Maybe you want to go check out the new Pilates class in town. Grab a girlfriend and be like, hey, come do this with me. I'm checking off my relational box of making sure that my relationships are strong, that I'm spending time with the people that are important to me while also getting in my exercise. Maybe it's even going for a walk. Hey, will you come on a walk with me? We can both push our strollers, or let's go do it real quick after we drop the kids off from school, or whatever it may be. Great way to merge 2 things together and get double productivity. One of my girlfriends had this idea and shared it with me a few years ago, and I thought it was so brilliant. Rather than saving bath time for the end of the day, she actually bathes her kids in the morning time or mid-morning, and that's the time that she uses to stay in the bathroom and get ready. So you have to be sitting in the bathroom anyway. So rather than bathing her kids at night, at the end of the day, she bathes her kids like mid-morning and then uses that time to do her hair, do her makeup. Maybe she'll even sit and do her nails while she has to be in the bathroom with the kids. I thought, that's brilliant. One thing that I've done with this is moving around where my kids are during bath time. So my littlest right now is the only one that actually still needs help and attention during bath time. But rather than him always taking his bath in the kids' bath, sometimes I'll tell him, okay, you're actually going to come in mommy and daddy's bathroom and take your bath in mommy and daddy's bathroom, because I use that time to clean the bathroom. And so even just that creativity of, okay, we don't have to do it in this exact same spot every time. I can very easily move a couple toys. I can very easily move the shampoo into another bathroom. And then while he's taking his bath, I can utilize that time to tidy up, to put things away. And I'm making sure that now all the bathrooms in my room, in my home, are getting clean. We're just hopping from bathroom to bathroom during bath time. Another way to batch activities is during drive time. How many of you are already at the stage where you feel like you're a taxi cab, just ping-ponging from one thing to the next? If I see some heads nodding. If you're not there yet, trust me, it's coming. The time is coming when all the activities will be on like every night of the week, and you'll be ping-ponging from thing to thing to thing, just driving around, like give me a little hat and call me cabbie, and I'll just be here for the next 3 hours driving from activity to activity. We spend so much time in the car. It can be such a great idea to utilize that car time to be intentional about teaching and training our kids, or teaching and training ourselves. Like I was saying, with the audiobooks or podcasts, great to pop that on in the car while you're driving. But for us, one thing that we like to do about this is we're very intentional with music during our car time. We are a family that loves traveling. We especially love to take big road trips. We've driven to South Dakota and back twice already. We're doing it again this coming summer. We've driven to Wyoming and back twice. We've driven to Montana and back twice. I mean, we go like far, far distances driving because we like to stop and see and do all the things along the way. But a couple years ago, well, this is probably like 4 or 5 years ago now, I told my husband, man, we're going to be spending so much time in the car. I would love, like, what are either like just plain educational truths that we can be teaching the kids, or what are theological truths that we can be teaching the kids during all of this time in the car? And so what we did is we created 2 different playlists. One is called Theology for Kids, and the other one is called Educational Songs. I can't remember which one I shared first. Hannah, will you? I did the QR code. Okay, so this is Theology for Kids playlist. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll take you to that Spotify playlist, and you can go ahead and add it. But this has such great songs that are teaching theological truths. A lot of them are just straight up Bible verses to music that we sing together as a family. There's one artist on there who has done like questions and answers for kids that are like theology questions and answers, and it's like kind of like this little rap that our kids love. There's another rap on there that's the books of the Bible, and now all my kids, down to, I'm not kidding, my 4-year-old can rap for you the books of the Bible. There's a song on there that sings the 10 Commandments. I mean, so many great songs that are teaching and instructive to not only the kids, but also to my husband and I. I mean, now we've got these things memorized. And it's just a great way to hide God's word into our heart and to give that spiritual instruction to our kids. So you can follow along with that if you'd like. I do tend to add to it sometimes when I find other good content, so the list is growing. But the second playlist that we created, which you can switch it, Hannah, to the next QR code, is Educational Songs playlist. So we chose this educational songs playlist because one of my daughters was like, I really want to be able to rattle off the 50 states like without even thinking about it. And so I was like, oh, I bet you they have a song for that. And then it just took us down this rabbit hole where we found so many songs. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to recite all of our presidents from beginning to end. And so now, again, I kid you not, all of Team Schrader, including down to our 4-year-old, can rattle off for you all of the presidents. There's songs on there about the water cycle. There's songs on there about planets. There's songs on there, it's like a rap, and it goes through the whole periodic table. I mean, just fun, overall educational songs for us and for our family. So you can follow along with either one of those. I add to that one too periodically, probably not as often as the theology for kids. I tend to add to that more frequently. But when I find another good educational song, I add it. So just being mindful and utilizing that time in the car to pop on either of these playlists and be like, we're going to strengthen up our knowledge of God, our knowledge of His Word. We're going to make it our aim to be able to sing all of the presidents or to be able to sing all of the states or whatever it is, and we're going to utilize these songs to do it. All right, that was 4 practices of time management for busy moms. So number 1, clearly identifying your priorities. Number 2, limiting or completely eliminating any distractions. Number 3, keeping a to-do list. And number 4, batching activities. If you were to choose even just one of these and commit to, I'm going to really focus on doing this one thing, your productivity, your time management will increase and get better. I mean, it would be great to try to commit to all 4, but even just one, if all 4 seem daunting at the time, even just one will help in your productivity and time management in the new year. So with that, I'll send you to your tables for table discussion. Will be a good time to kind of share creativity and share different ways that everyone else does this at your table. And I hope you have a really productive discussion. Thanks, ladies.